Hey everybody, happy 2014 to each and every single one of you. Now, for some odd reason, after the Mega Man marathon, and particularly after playing Ghosts and Goblins, I was suddenly in the mood to play Castlevania again. In October of 2011, I dedicated the entire month of looking at the likes of the original trilogy on the NES, Super Castlevania IV on the SNES, and finally Bloodlines on the Sega Genesis. By the way, you may have noticed that I'm actually showing the games in their correct aspect ratio this time around. I don't know if it was an update on my Nintendo Wii U, but Virtual Console games are no longer stretched when playing them on a widescreen TV. So rejoice, you hardcore video game enthusiasts, everything's in a box again. Now this isn't another month of Castlevania, but for the next two videos I'm going to be looking at the next two games that connect in terms of plot. Castlevania Rondo of Blood and Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Those of you who watched my Super Castlevania IV review will know that I deem Rondo of Blood to be the better game between the two. But it's been some time since I last played the game, so has my overall opinion changed? First, a little history. This is the TurboGrafx-16, a system first released in Japan in 1987 under the name of the PC Engine, and brought over to North America under the TurboGrafx moniker in 1989. Supposedly, it was meant to compete with the Nintendo Entertainment System thanks to its higher processing power and CD attachment that could result in higher quality games. It ended up competing with the likes of the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo, and well, I think you know the rest. The system wasn't bad by any means, its library of games just couldn't compete with what the Genesis and SNES offered, although it did do remarkably better in Japan than in America. In 1993, what countless considered being the high point of classic Castlevania action was released exclusively for the Japanese market, Castlevania Rondo of Blood. For years, this title would elude American audiences. In 1995, a sort of semi-sequel/remake of the game was created for the Super Nintendo called Castlevania Dracula X. But for many, it paled in comparison to the original PC Engine version. I'll get into Dracula X later down the video, but it wasn't until 2007 when the original Rondo of Blood was finally brought over shores via Castlevania the Dracula X Chronicles, a remake produced for the PlayStation Portable. Since then, the original PC Engine version has seen an international release on the Nintendo Wii's Virtual Console, and will be the version I'll be primarily focusing on, though I'll also give the PSP remake some attention as well. Damn, it looks like I'm reviewing 3 games for this video. So just why was this game a Japanese exclusive for so long? I can't say for sure, but I always thought the Castlevania franchise had a healthy success rate in North America. Perhaps it was because of the flimsy sales figures of the TurboGrafx-16 in the United States, but as I said earlier, it took them until 2007 to give us the game via a remake on the PSP. Wouldn't it have been more economical to release a port on the PlayStation 1 during its successful run, or the PlayStation 2 for that matter as part of an anthology series? Well, it's finally here and I guess that's all that matters, so let's get this started. A forewarning. If you're playing this game off of the Virtual Console, keep in mind that you're playing the original Japanese release. That means Japanese dialogue and cutscenes with no subtitles. The PSP version of the game contains the PC Engine original completely translated and dubbed, so why exactly do we only have the Japanese version available here? It's not really a story-driven game, but I always did find that strange. The year is 1792. A dark priest known as Shaft has resurrected the evil Count himself. Yes, the priest's name is Shaft, you dig? Dracula takes little to no time setting a plan into motion. Knowing damn well that a Belmont is surely on his way to wreck his shit up, and he is, his name is Richter, descendant of Simon Belmont, Dracula immediately attacks the Belmont's hometown and kidnaps 4 maidens, one of them being Richter's girlfriend, Annette. Richter suits up for action and prepares to meet his destiny as a descendant of the Belmont clan. As tradition would have it, Richter utilizes the vampire killer, although he can't whip in multiple directions, and he can't even do that dangly whip thingy to take care of annoying enemies like birds or frogs. He's also not as athletic as Super Castlevania IV Simon, because he can't really influence his jump in mid-air, which means you need to be a little more careful when it comes to jumping across platforms. The jump itself doesn't feel as stiff as the NES days, but as I stressed in the Bloodlines review, I don't know why they felt the need to revert back to the old style jump when Simon and Super Castlevania IV felt so comfortable. Richter has this backflip he can perform by tapping the jump button twice, which makes for a great way of avoiding large attacks, but I don't think this is a good substitution for mid-air controls. Stairways aren't really a problem, because Richter is capable of both jumping on and off stairs, so you're not really vulnerable when climbing them. Not to mention the returning sub-weapons, which offers another means of dishing out pain at the cost of some hearts per use. Richter, however, can also utilize the item crash, which is pretty much a super attack that depends on what sub-weapon you currently have equipped. It's like the advanced sub-weapon attack you can do in Bloodlines, only on a bigger scale. Hydrostorm, the super attack you can perform with the Holy Water, is probably my favorite item crash, if only because it covers the entire screen and strikes multiple times. Despite the lack of extra mobility, I don't think the game penalizes you for being so limited. I mean, as long as the level design doesn't require you to have abilities that you no longer have, there shouldn't be a problem, right? Rondo of Blood's level design, I believe, allows the player to comfortably assess the environment so that you can perform a proper way of dealing with the challenge ahead. It's also very much lacking in being unfair. The number of bottomless pits don't even come close to the amount in the older games, and I could only recall maybe a couple of times when things got a little old school, like a bat knocking off a tiny platform, or anything else that results from bullshit knockback. Rondo of Blood is very heavy on alternate pathways, and more often than not, falling into a supposed pit leads you directly into one, so you don't die, and the adventure continues on. You have no idea how relieving this was to me. I remember my first time tackling stage 3 and getting to this section right here with those ever so hateful Medusa heads. I thought I was a dead man when mid-air knockback sent me to the trap floor, but instead of dying, I was just sent to the bottom part of the level, alive to fight the upper pathway another day. Platforming is for the most part non-lethal, and your only price for missing a jump is not being able to get some of those goodies via candles or breakable walls. As long as you're not reckless, the only time you should ever die is when the enemy simply gets the better of you. Whether it's this sword guy with an obnoxiously long attack range, this spear guard that can block certain sub-weapons, or stage hazards that are tricky to avoid. Some levels do have their moments though, like alternate stage 4, which is kind of annoying to complete with Richter because his horizontal whip can't do much against these tiny ass frogs. And if you don't have an appropriate sub-weapon to deal with them, you're going to be taking a fuckload of pot shots, which by the way, can also sport knockback at times. Oh, for God's sakes! Now you may have noticed that I said alternate stage 4. That's because Rondo of Blood not only has multiple pathways, but it also has alternate levels that you can reach by taking a specific route. For example, in the first level, you can continue on to the right from here, and face the purple wyvern to proceed to stage 2, or you can break the wall on the left here, and face an entirely different boss that leads you to alternate stage 2. Sometimes, finding the means to enter an alternate stage can be as simple as discovering a breakable wall, or by stumbling onto the pathway by complete accident, like the example I mentioned in stage 3. That means in addition to having 7 regular levels, there's also 4 alternative levels that you can possibly discover and finish for the sake of having a completed save file. You don't need to complete any of the alternate stages to reach Dracula, and if you somehow end up in one against your will, you can always reset the game and start from where you left off because this game sports a save feature that also allows you to revisit any stage you previously explored, regardless of whether or not you actually completed it. So why bother with alternate stages or pathways to begin with? Well, besides offering the possibilities of finding new ways to reach Dracula and thus increase replayability, there's also the matter of the 4 maidens that Dracula kidnapped in the beginning of the game. Your girlfriend Annette is always located in stage 7, the final stage before Dracula, but in order to rescue the likes of Terra or Iris, you need to reach the respective alternate stages. The one maiden that should take precedence over all of them though is Maria Renard, who you rescue in stage 2 by nabbing the key item while being chased by the undead behemoth, and using said key to unlock a door further down the level. Unlike the other 3 maidens who really just serve as a means to get the completed ending, you can actually play as Maria when you rescue her. Playing as a 12-year-old in a pink dress compared to the manliness that is Richter Belmont? Fuck you! Maria is awesome! She moves twice as fast as Richter, can attack twice as fast as Richter, as well as move and attack at the same time. She has a double jump which makes platforming almost a complete non-issue, 2 slide abilities which are great for getting around obstacles, and her sub-weapon animal buddies can fuck shit up! Can't handle a certain level with Richter? Reset the game, load up your save file, switch to Maria, and watch as she almost effortlessly deals with something a player in the hands of a Belmont could not. She's great for newbies, and a load of fun to play with when you just want to destroy everything in your way. She's a glass cannon though, so you can't be that reckless, otherwise you'll find yourself losing health extremely fast. The total amount of invincibility frames when you take a hit don't compare to the likes of the older games. Combined with being knocked around like a ragdoll at times, it's surprisingly easy to take a bunch of hits because of a shortened invincibility period. It's kind of aggravating, honestly. Using the combined efforts of Richter and Maria is one of the best parts of the game for me. I love the partner system in Castlevania III, and while I can't switch between the two on the fly like in that game, I appreciate having the choice whenever I load up my file, or whenever I get a game over. I generally like to explore a stage normally with Richter, and once I defeat the boss, I like to revisit the level with Maria to discover alternate pathways and different bosses altogether. Not every pathway leads to a new boss for that area, but the sheer existence of another means of getting to a new location gives me reason to go back and replay a level. That's the key word here, replayability. Which route do I take to get to stage 6? Who do I use to get there? Will I take the high road or the low road? What secrets will I discover when I take that specific pathway? There's so much to consider. Linearity in a Castlevania game was never that big of an issue for me. After all, I still greatly enjoyed the likes of Super Castlevania IV, despite the lack of multiple characters and multiple pathways. But I love that I'm given a choice of how I want to proceed with my game. Rondo of Blood is also not as brutal as previous entries, thankfully. I hope to Shaft I never have to encounter another Castlevania game as difficult as the third one. I get it. Classic Castlevania is supposed to be difficult, but that was trying just a little too hard. Rondo of Blood requires a healthy amount of reflexes and skill, but also doesn't sport any of that bullshit that makes a game arbitrarily difficult, like fucking with viewpoints or making a previously weak enemy suddenly hit harder than what we're accustomed to. The difficulty scales naturally. It grows as the player grows more and more comfortable with the controls and how the game works. The bosses are all big and threatening, but every single one of them can be taken down with careful timing and knowing when to whip the ever-living shit out of them. Sub-weapons and item crashes can also help if you've been saving up the hearts, so as long as you continue to play carefully, nothing in this game should make you crack your controller. The aesthetical quality of the game in its entirety is just another reason to go back to it. While I can't exactly say of whether or not this game pushes the system to its limits, the amount of detail put into the level design is quite evident. It all varies from level to level, and I'll admit, not all of it looks good, but the choice of colors and design on most of the stages really make them stand out. Even the subtlest of details can make the levels feel completely unique. Up until I recorded footage for this review, I never noticed that man hanging in the background at alternate stage 3, or the set of glowing eyes that haunts the player at the beginning of stage 2. Coupled with a lot of nostalgic throwbacks to previous games either via level design or bosses, Rondo of Blood is a joy to my eyes. Maybe I'm overselling the elements, but things like that just enrich my experience when done correctly. You know what also helps? And I think you guys know where I'm going at this point. The soundtrack. It's a Castlevania game, of course I'm going to bring up the music. The game utilizes Red Book audio thanks to CD-ROM technology, so we're talking high quality, blood pumping, toe tapping, upbeat 90s synthesized music here. We got great remixes of old themes like Vampire Killer, Bloody Tears, and Beginning, but the original tracks like Cross of Fear, Ghost Ship Painting, and Slash are marvelous, absolutely marvelous. One stage I absolutely can't stand is Alternate Stage 5, which you can only play after beating the game strangely. It's a mess in terms of structure, level design, and challenge, probably because of how it's required to get there, but I tolerate it all because its music track, Opus 13, is so fucking catchy. I love this soundtrack, can't get enough of it. From the moment the opening cutscene with Richter plays, to the credit sequence after beating Dracula, Rondo of Blood is one of my absolute favorite Castlevania soundtracks of all time. But enough of the lovey-dovey stuff, let's finish this. The final encounter with Dracula just might be one of the easiest incarnations of the Prince of Darkness so far, when you properly dodge and attack his head of course. The second form, while intimidating, is even easier. As long as you remember to stay close so you can easily walk under him when he jumps, the only thing you'll ever need to watch out for are those fireballs. If you're playing as Maria, then you won the game as soon as you walked into the room. Richter and Maria tell Dracula to go to hell, complete with the castle crumbling into nothingness. Oh, no, actually it doesn't collapse at all during Richter's ending. Huh. Beating the game with Maria causes the castle to collapse, but her ending is played for laughs more than anything, seeing as you beat the game with a 12-year-old girl in a pink dress. Her credits theme is pretty catchy though, what the fuck? I don't know why the PSP of all systems was the candidate to host remakes of certain games. I already mentioned Mega Man Powered Up, but there was also Maverick Hunter X, which was a remake of the first Mega Man X game, certain Final Fantasy titles, Valkyrie Profile, Ultimate Ghost and Goblins, I can go on and on. Castlevania the Dracula X Chronicles was the 2007 remake that finally allowed American audiences to experience Castlevania Rondo of Blood without resorting to some sort of emulator or Dracula X on the Super Nintendo. As you can no doubt tell from the cinematic opening alone, the production values were heavily increased, including enhanced sound design, and a soundtrack complete with hard-rocking remixes and orchestral arrangements that I'm sure will please even the most die-hard Castlevania fans. The story was a bit more fleshed out with added sequences of dialogue during the intro, and everything's been translated to English. With that in mind, the voice acting isn't too bad, though Richter at times sounds like he's reading his lines after inhaling some helium.
The name's Richter Belmont. Here, take my hand.
Everyone else does a pretty good job, including Dracula, who manages to pull off the whole Prince of Darkness thing rather well, with a bit of ham thrown in for good measure.
We must prepare a proper welcome, Belmont.
Rescuing the likes of Terra and Iris has also been given more significance, since you need to rescue the two before you can save your girlfriend Annette. Failing to do so results in a boss fight exclusive to the PSP version of the game, at the cost of killing your now evil girlfriend. Rescuing the girls also grants you abilities that allow you to bypass certain obstacles, like red skeleton barriers and walls made of crystal. They're not mandatory to beat the game, but the ending you'll get won't exactly be fulfilling. Exploring every nook and cranny in your pathway can also lead you to neat little collectibles like records that you can add to your music collection, or use to change the background theme of a specific stage to your liking. You can even unlock other games after finding them, like the PC Engine original like I mentioned earlier, Symphony of the Night, which I'll get into later, and whatever the hell this thing is. Apparently this is what you would get if you didn't have the necessary system card to play the original game on the PC Engine. Lasts all about 2 minutes with Opus 13 playing in the background. It's almost like a pirated version of Rondo of Blood you can only get in a shady flea market. Finally, rescuing all the girls gives Dracula a third transformation, which is hard as fuck. He's got attacks up the wazoo and a shitload of health. So I hope you know how to properly dodge everything he throws at you. This is going to be a long battle. I honestly just stick with Maria, if only because I love hearing Dracula comment on how he lost to a little girl.
Completely impossible! Beaten by a little girl?
There are a lot of elements that make the PSP remake of the game the go-to version of Rondo of Blood, but there's something about it that seems off to me. From a visual standpoint, I think the game is okay, but things can look a little cluttered and muddy depending on the stage, and everything else overall doesn't pop like it did in the original. In fact, I think this game can look outright dull at times. The Belmont strut also doesn't translate well in 3D in my opinion. See this? Manly. See this? Stick up the ass. The English version of the original Rondo of Blood you can unlock also has some audio synchronization issues during cutscenes, leading to dialogue playing way ahead of when it's supposed to. Nothing major, but it is distracting at times. Though I personally wish the Dracula X Chronicles saw a release on a system other than the PlayStation Portable, that doesn't stop the game from being a great rendition of what I think is the best old school Castlevania game out there. Sure, Richter isn't as mobile as Simon from Super Castlevania IV, but the game excels in so many other areas for me to really care. I love the level design, the challenge level is damn near perfect for a classic Castlevania title, using Maria can be a blast when you just want to have fun, and at no point am I ever bored. Multiple pathways and multiple characters multiply the amount of fun I can have with this game, and Rondo of Blood to me is a fun game. That just leaves this game, Castlevania Dracula X, released in 1995 for the Super Nintendo. Given how large Rondo of Blood was thanks to the CD format it was released on, cramming it all inside of a Super Nintendo cartridge was a technical impossibility. As a result, Castlevania Dracula X is almost a completely different game. The plot isn't really different though. Dracula has kidnapped Richter's girlfriend as well as Maria, and Richter needs to travel across the land to save them and stop Dracula from being a douche. Richter controls pretty much exactly how he did in Rondo of Blood, but his strutting speed seems an awful lot slower, leading me to jump all over the place just to get a move on. He can still do the backflip and he has access to item crashes, so everything checks out there. However, the rest of the game does not. Let's start with the small stuff. You can rescue Maria, but you can never play as her. It's Richter from beginning to end in this game. Secondly, there are barely any multiple pathways in this game. There are a grand total of 2 alternate stages, one you can't even afford to fall into if you plan on saving Maria or Annette for that matter. Since this game doesn't support a save feature or level select like Rondo of Blood, you'll need to enter a password to get yourself back on the right track if you want the good ending. The process of rescuing the girls is also pretty fucking annoying too, because the key required to unlock their prison cells is obtained in a previous level, and if you die on the level they're located in, you lose the key, requiring you to reset the game, input the password, and try again. Being unable to actually play as Maria only accentuates this issue for me. So the game is more linear than Rondo of Blood, which I stated is not a huge issue for me as long as the game is fun to play, but this game is not very fun to play. Just to get this out, I will say that the music for the most part was kept relatively intact during the transition. The quality isn't as high as the Red Book audio in Rondo of Blood obviously, but the compositions are still very good, and worthy to be called Castlevania music. The graphics, while not as detailed as its counterpart, holds up well for SNES standards. The major culprit here is the fucking level design. If it's not downright dull, it's downright bullshit. Remember how annoying bottomless pits were in the old games? They sure do, because they're back in full force here. If there's one thing this game has nostalgic throwbacks to, it's deaths via knockback. The enemy placement sucks too. Spear guards are fucking everywhere in this game, usually in positions that make them very awkward to fight against, which I wouldn't have a problem with if Richter wasn't so fucking restricted with his moveset. It's almost like they designed this game with Super Castlevania IV Simon in mind, but decided at the last second to give Richter the retro treatment. Lastly, who the fuck designed the final boss against Dracula? Okay, so the final boss in Rondo of Blood wasn't really that hard, but did you really need to throw bottomless pits all over the fucking place? Just one wrong move and your ass is dead. The safest way to beat him is to plant your ass down on this pillar and wait until he appears on a platform that you can easily strike him with your axe sub-weapon, but even then, it takes fucking forever. So not only is this fight's design horseshit, it's also boring. That's not even including his second form, which has a greater chance of knocking you into a pit, starting the entire fight over again. The levels aren't very long, and you have unlimited continues to keep going until your thumbs fall off, but completing the game doesn't feel as satisfying to do compared to previous games in the series, specifically Castlevania 1 and Super Castlevania IV. I know it's unfair to compare this game to Rondo of Blood, there just wasn't any way to fit this game into an SNES cartridge. But if I can't compare it to Rondo of Blood, I'm gonna compare it to Super Castlevania IV, and Castlevania Dracula X is not what I would call a worthy follow-up. The game is not horrible, it just has a lot of bullshit that makes it an overall inferior product. It's also expensive, and I'm not sure why. Maybe because it's rare? Something like that? I don't know. But thanks for the loan, Uncle. You saved me $130. For now. Who knows, I might just buy the damn game myself to complete the collection. Help me.